Hey guys, this is Jay Calderon with Jay Unboxing, giving you my second annual boxing awards for the year. And 2022, I would argue, has been something of an year. Well, there has certainly been some highs. The last 12 months feel like we just couldn't quite get all the right fights made. There were missed opportunities, fights that just couldn't materialize, and too many excuses being given. In some respects, the first quarter of 2023 already looks more promising than the last 4 quarters that we've currently lived through. That having been said, did we see our fair share of decent moments and fights? Yes, I would say so. So, without much more rambling, let's get into our first award. Now, first off, we have our Fighter of the Year award, and that goes to Dmitry Bivol. And it really shouldn't be a surprise, truthfully. There were only about 3 other reasonable options for this spot: Bam Rodriguez, Naoya Inoue, and Devin Haney. Bam jumped out onto the scene and won a world title, one of the few fighters actually that fought 3 times in significant fights this year. And both Inoue and Haney had great 2022's by any stretch, with both remaining undefeated after 2 fights and unifying their respective divisions. However, Bivol beat the man in the sport, and did so relatively easily. In his May encounter with Canelo Alvarez, Bivol put the boxing world on notice. He jumped up in every conceivable ranking, snagged the biggest purse of his career along the way with the biggest win, and shook up the entire sport. Mind you, this was as an underdog. He was in the underdog role in this situation. Now, with hindsight, that seems crazy considering his skills. Regardless, this does matter in terms of kind of looking at his accomplishments this year. What's more, he followed that up by facing fellow unbeaten Gilberto Ramirez and dominated his way to another big win on the year. 2022 was such a good year for Bivol that it also changed how many perceived him in his potential unification showdown with knockout artist and fellow titleist Artur Beterbiev. Before 2022, Bivol would be considered the sizable underdog by most if the pair were to meet. After this year, it's considered a truly pick'em sort of fight. Whether it's titles and defenses, big events and purses, big wins, tough fights, whatever you want to consider it, impact on the sport, however you slice it, no one had a more productive year than Dmitry Bivol. Now, up next, we have what I would consider the fight of the year, and that would go to Leigh Wood defeating Michael Conlan. To be fair, this was a tougher category than I would have expected, not because 2022 gave us so many choices, but the 2 that came to mind are pretty hard to split in my opinion. The 2 choices for me were Leigh Wood versus Michael Conlan and Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. Ultimately, what split the pair of fights for me is the finish. While Taylor Serrano was exciting all the way down the stretch, Wood Conlan was just as much in terms of the ebbs and flows, just as much action, but the difference is that it had a much more conclusive ending, and that matters when you're talking about just the fight itself. It wasn't the biggest fight in the sport, it certainly wasn't the biggest fight they had to offer, but what it lacked in outright top-level significance, it more than made up for with sheer action and spirit from both parties, to be honest. Adding to the drama was the upset factor, but not just because Wood was the underdog, it's that he looked the part for large portions of the fight, and yet continued to press, continued to move forward, got closer and closer until it happened. And in the end, that perseverance paid off with one of the best knockouts of the year. Just a very, very good fight with very little relent and a nice surprise ending. Can't ask for much more. And up next, we have the knockout of the year. And to me, that is Joe Cordina knocking out Kenichi Ogawa in the 2nd round. Now, when it comes to knockouts, there are certain things that I like. I like a clean, single-shot knockout, where the fallen fighter lands flat. To me, nothing quite looks as impressive in the ring in terms of stoppages. That's what we got with Joe Cordina's stoppage over Kenichi Ogawa. Yes, for the spectacle of it, Leigh Wood's KO of Michael Conlan, where the latter was sent out of the ring, likely wins a lot of these awards from people, but to me, an undefeated contender stopping a former world champion in 2 rounds that hadn't lost in a decade with a single shot takes the cake for me. It just does. You could also give a shout to Jermell Charlo stopping Castaño due to the significance of the fight, but it wasn't nearly as pretty. You could talk about Joe Joyce stopping Parker in terms of its brutality, but it wasn't nearly as significant to me. Cordina stopping Ogawa had the perfect amount of everything. So, with that, you have the winner in my book. And from there, we move into the upset in the year, and this is no surprise in most people's books: Dmitry Bivol defeating Canelo Alvarez via 12-round unanimous decision. Quite frankly, there isn't much more of an option for this category if we're being honest. Technically, you could look at Fernando Martinez defeating Jermell and Cajas in their first encounter, or Hector Garcia handing Chris Colbert his first defeat and say, hey, those were bigger upsets statistically in terms of the betting odds, for example. However, the upset that genuinely feels the biggest for 2022 is Bivol's win over the super hot Canelo Alvarez at the time. Now, perhaps it shouldn't have been such a surprise. Bivol has always struck me as very talented and capable, but that general assessment doesn't negate how specifically impressive Bivol's win was on the night. Aside from being the underdog, he's going up against the biggest star in the sport. Everyone involved outside of Bivol's immediate team wants and expects him to lose, yet feeling no pressure at all, the man delivers and gets it done. It has to be the upset of the year. Next up, we have the round of the year. Now, giving that to Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castaño 2. This is round 5. Now, I suppose I could be technical with this and talk about the statistics of the round. It was the high point of a very exciting and competitive encounter. Both men threw fight highs, with Charlo throwing 69 punches and Castaño throwing a bit more at 91. Both men landed fight highs, with Charlo landing 32 of his shots for a 46% success rate versus Castaño landing 35 for a 38% success rate. And this was after a feverish round 4 just prior, where they threw and landed their second highest totals and were both stunned near the end of the frame. You could argue the fourth round was just as good, but neither round lacked much is the point. What's more impressive than those statistics, however, is that both remained technical, but they were still swinging hard with intentions to hurt with every single shot. It was the perfect combination for an amazing round. The only round that feels close would be the final round between Taylor and Serrano, but I wouldn't blame you for picking either. I just happen to think that Charlo Castaño happened to edge this particular category. Both fights deserve a rewatch if you haven't seen them in a while, specifically these rounds, but in any event, there is your winner there. And from there, we move into the event of the year, which is Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano, which took place for all of the gold at 135 pounds. Now, to be truthful, it's hard to imagine a more captivating event for 2022. We had some decent ones with Tyson Fury's return to England, where he was fighting in front of 90,000 fans and stopped Dillian Whyte, but it wasn't in the most competitive or meaningful fight, in my personal opinion. There was the other prominent female encounter between Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall, which saw an all-women's card that broke record numbers in terms of views for Sky Sports. Again, this is an important fight and a big event as well. Canelo Alvarez was also a part of a couple of solid events against Dmitry Bivol in May and Gennady Golovkin in September, but quite frankly, neither of those fights had quite the punch you would expect from a Canelo Alvarez fight. And in the end, no event did better and equally lived up to its nearly as well as Taylor Serrano. According to broadcaster DAZN, the fight brought in 1.5 million viewers, which is for a paid subscription app, so that's very, very good. It sold out New York's Madison Square Garden's main room with 19,000 plus tickets sold to very, very loud, enthusiastic fans, and generated $1.5 million at the live gate, likely all records for women's boxing. However, forget the women's boxing side. Those numbers are better than most fights, period. And the fact that we might be treated to another in 2023 in a stadium fight in Ireland would be all the more amazing. But for 2022, that is my personal event of the year. And finally, here we have comeback of the year, which goes out to Natasha Jonas. And to me, this may be the easiest category to pick. Think about it this way. Jonas may have been a bit written off in 2021 or 2020, however, and she had suffered her second loss to British rival Katie Taylor, was nearly stepping away from the sport for good, and had, in many people's minds, failed to live up to her amateur resume as Britain's first female boxer. Then, the fighter who debuted at lightweight decides to take the chance and moves up to junior middleweight just last year, and spends the next 12 months capturing virtually all the gold at 154 pounds. In the year, she pulled off 3 wins, all in separate unification bouts, and even snagged a Ring Magazine belt as well. Again, this is someone nearly retired, written off, that started 19 pounds lighter in her career. There really just isn't, in my personal opinion, a fighter that comes close to that kind of calendar year, and that's why she gets the award and gets it alone. And in any event, those are my personal picks for the awards. I'd love to hear yours. Drop down in the comment section below. I do apologize for not being as active on the channel recently. Was kind of going through some technical difficulties. Hopefully got those resolved, and I will be coming out with some predictions coming up in the next few weeks or so, maybe the next week even for that matter. But as I mentioned, let me know what you guys thought about my picks, and let me know yours as well down in the comments. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. I greatly, greatly appreciate all that you guys have given me this year. You can follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at junboxing@gmail.com, and you can visit junboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, news, all that good stuff. And as always, until next time.